internet, you can connect with Eagles 102.3 FM Abuja. Log on to our website www.eaglesfm.com. Follow and engage with us now on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok at Eagles FM Abuja, Instagram at Eagles FM 1023. Download our apps on your Android and iOS stores. Eagles 102.3 FM Abuja, your radio experience you can count on.
Eagles 102.3 Abuja.
And very quickly, we are back just like we promised before. I am Omo Ife Peace Osemere. You can always call me Ife for short. I've got my guest in the studios he is the coordinator actually, Generation for Societal Change, Abuja, Sultan Kamal Abdulaziz. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ife. Good afternoon.
Are you competing with the Sultan of Sokoto?
Actually, no. I think everybody is a king in his zone. I would like to stick to mine.
Okay. All right. Yeah. All right. I hope I didn't throw you under the bus anyway.
Absolutely. You could see I answered you just as I should. So,
because I was looking for the third or the fourth or the fifth. You know, he is Sultan.
I'm actually so used to this question. So whenever it is I introduce myself to someone, I am expecting a follow-up question. Sultan of where? Where are you from? So I'm already trained for this. I already know the right things to say when I'm being asked.
And dear listener, I also have a special guest in the studios this afternoon.
Okay, Udrak Daniel is my name, and I wouldn't let her go so deeply. What she was going to say. But Kamal, it feels good to know that your name has a sultan to it.
Absolutely.
Just realizing that now.
Yeah. So much historical correlations. Okay. I guess when we start this conversation, it will overshadow the reason why we're here, but we'll just definitely have it outside.
Well, all right. So today we're going to be looking at a very topical issue, just like I said before, lack of integrity within the educational sector. First of all, this seems to be a very typical trend and somewhat a trend that can be related to the youth. No pun intended. I'm not saying that the elderly people who are within the educational sector, they are not also aiding, this process. Yeah. But lack of integrity in the education sector actually manifests in various forms, each eroding quality and credibility of learning institutions, from the admission process to examinations and even the awarding of degrees. Unethical practices, they also undermine the very foundation of education. But Kamal, let me start by asking you that what exactly do you make of the whole admission process, be it to secondary school, the university, polytechnic, or even college of education? The whole process seems to be very complex.
Indeed.
This is, and it appears that one is left with at least one option, but to pay their way through.
All right. Thank you very much for asking a very, very good question. And I would like to start by saying that foundation is everything. Foundation, having a system that works, that's actually the solution to every problem we have as Nigerians. And when you look at our very own foundation, you'd see that for a long time now, it's been faulted, or maybe midway, the building blocks have been repositioned, where was supposed to be facing outwards, it's facing backwards. And you could tell building on that particular kind of foundation afterwards, or that kind of progress, isn't progress at all. One day the winds could blow and everything you've built would just crumble. And what am I trying to say in essence? The process of getting admissions have been jeopardized, obviously.
By who?
By us Nigerians and people in position. Because first things first, if you were a person of integrity, which maybe goes back to our core values as Nigerians, you wouldn't go into an office and plead that someone else's son's name is taken off the admission list for yours. Your son isn't any better than another person's son, because this person in position doesn't put you in place or doesn't guarantee you a favor. If his name was there in the first place, it's because he's deserving of it, because this particular person offering the admission did not have a face to the name. So obviously what he used to make that selection process was the grade, as it should be. And that's what systems and foundations are all for. If we have defined that there is a system in place that only takes account of people who are deserving of an admission process, and it would be strictly put to practice that unless you're deserving, and I mean, you don't need to know anybody, there ought to be a vetting process. Let's say an open system, just like we're having now with technology. You have a Google form and you have an ethical committee to vet whatever name that have been put in, and if there's any omission of any sort or any change, you could be called to order and accountable, just to say that something changed. Why was this changed? Then you see a lot would be resolved, and that's entirely comes back to ethics and value.
Okay.
Lack of integrity, lack of accountability systems. You see, all of these things are jeopardizing our educational sector.
Okay, before I let you come in, I personally think that there's been this concern that some of these officers, within the institution or places of learning, they are not well paid. And that is why most of them would want to compromise into the extent of, inducing the students to pay, to get their names shortlisted.
I mean, that's actually very true. And that's where I feel like there are different ways to which you could make your voices heard, right? Compromising the very system that brought you into position, and knowing the dignity in the profession that you're into would help you go a long way. There's something I believe people call your dog what you call it, right? So in the first place, if you're underpaid and still basically doing what you ought to do, there's one thing, it's like a soccer match, it's already 1-0. 1-0 in the sense that I have done my due diligence to do what is expected of me. And it's obvious that what you're paying me is incommensurate to the service I am lashing out or I'm giving out. That time now you have an amplified voice to go to the system and say, you know what, I am giving this level of value, and I feel like this is undeserving. And do you know one thing? The universe also even repays it. I know we don't want to go philosophical or religious angle to it, but I mean, if you do your due diligence and teach regardless, you see those people who are trying to bribe you because they have a lot of money in their pockets. If they do the due diligence and send their children who aren't undeserving in the first place, or who aren't really equipped to get to the educational system, once they send these people to your school and you do a good job in trying to make them better, obviously they saw why they couldn't get in there first.
All right.
They might just end up gifting you with a lot that you would have looked for.
Well, okay. Well, as much as I want to agree with, Mr. Kamal right there, well, I agree with you in a couple of things to an extent, but I'd like to start from the, tail end, the place of integrity. Integrity is integrity. If you don't have it, you don't have it. It's just what it is. No circumstantial, issue or situation should erode your integrity. It's more like saying that, okay, there is an excuse for ignorance at the lower court. No, the lower court is inadmissible. That I ignorance. I didn't know. That's why. No, it's just that whoever lacks integrity does not have it in the first place, because there are still people within the systems, not just teaching, not just education, in other aspects, in other sectors of the country, who have stood by what they believe. The only thing that happens, which is a sad reality, is that these people don't last long to tell the stories. That's because it does seem as though the system in itself has grown bigger and is ruled by individuals rather than, working on its own. Do you understand? So the structure is eroded, the system is destroyed, and those who seemingly had claimed to have integrity discovered that they're on the outer side of the wall. Right? And those who decide that they'll stick to integrity either die as paupers or don't even make it past 30 or 40. And now that's us looking at another treasure, because these are treasure. These are people of treasure that should be preserved so that they can indeed impact in the generation either our generation, of course they impacted, and that's why they're still alive, and the generation of those that we're going to bring into the world. Do you understand? But if we're going back to the place of, the racketeering, the bribery, and everything, it goes back to the fact that prioritization. What are we prioritizing as a country, as a people? Knowledge is supposed to be, light.
Priority?
It's supposed to be a priority. It's supposed to be, they say knowledge is light, knowledge is peace, knowledge is even everything. In fact, as they say, the more you know, the better for you, right? Some people still say the less I know, the better for me. But it goes two ways. The less I know about certain things that could harm me, maybe the better for me. But I think knowledge, ultimately is just the best. Let me know what will harm me. Let me know what will not harm me. Then I know how to navigate, because I'm a human being with an intellectual capacity, an IQ, right? So that's just it. When we go through the cracks of a system, because as if you ask me, I would have said 20 or 30 or 50 years ago the system was cracked. Now it's broken. When it was still under cracks, it would have been repaired. Now that it's broken, it needs a major rejig.
So whose responsibility would that be, Kamal?
Okay, so talking about ethics and values, I don't intend that we start it from this particular level.
Okay.
Yeah, well, it's a sectoral problem we are discussing now. We have to trace it to the general core of basically the conversation, which is every one of us. The government is actually a consensus, is a general consensus. It's all of us. Citizens, leaders, educational basically institutions, religious homes have to come together and say, you know what, we have to sustain this ethics and values, because that's our foundation, that's what we can build on, that's our identity, and that's what we should prioritize. So while everybody would want to point at the government, right? The governments are individuals who are also the citizens. They were once citizens just like each and every one of us. And what went wrong was in their family settings, in their schools, before they even got to those government positions, they haven't instilled the ethics and values in them. They weren't people of integrity. And just as you have said, integrity is whole. It's not you having half thoughts here and there. If you're presented with a situation, I might do this, I might not. That's not integrity. Integrity is knowing that I won't do this, and you'd stand to your strong moral principles and your conviction of the reason why you aren't going to do it in the first place. And it all starts from the family system. What you're being told, what you're being taught from home. Then to the educational system as well. Then you're taught in maybe your civics education, you shouldn't do this because it has these consequences, you shouldn't do this. And when you go to your religious institutions too, you're being reminded. And you know what that consistency does for you? It gives you that wholeness, because everywhere you go, you hear one thing. You will be forced to know that there's some certain level of consistency. There's truth in this, because everybody in every institution, every place you've been to is saying this one thing. So if you try to contradict every lesson that are being taught, then you will be the odd one left out. So not just saying it, but even acting it, and then allowing it to manifest in our society for these children to see. Because children actually don't just learn by listening. They watch you very closely. When you tell your child, don't do this, don't touch that, and you end up doing it, the first person to remind you would be that child of yours. But daddy, you said, but you're doing this. So you see, it's not even about what you said, but what you're doing. And even in your actions, you see your child picks it up. So from the family system to the educational system to the religious institution to even the government being citizens who are now in positions to guide us, to liberate us, to motivate us, right, are all responsible for ensuring that integrity is sustained within our ecosystem.
Right.
Well, another thing that comes to mind when you talk about the lack of integrity in the education sector is one that I wouldn't say this is actually topping the list right now, but it has to do with forging your qualifications or certifications at the end of the day. Even within the political space, we've seen some political opponents, try to witch hunt.
That's right.
Others like, oh no, these certifications that you have presented, they are false. You actually forged them and all of that. So this has been a trend maybe right from the 1960s.
Indeed.
I mean, for the lack of, better, presentation.
Indeed.
But at the end of the day, how can we really deal with this? And it's beginning to look like we are somewhat developing a cold feet, or there's this lukewarm attitude in terms of addressing it. You recall very clearly, I think in 2023, late 2023 or last year, when an investigative journalist actually exposed the degree mill, right, outside Nigeria, by the way. So for this trend to have, thrived for this long, what exactly could be the reason? Is this something we can actually break?
Yes, we can, actually. And that's why this conversation is very important, right? It would have just been integrity in any sector, right, and would have it. But a lack of integrity in the educational sector is what's stemming into what we are having now, unqualified leaders to leaders. We are complaining, one of the issues that is evident all around now is bad governance. A few years back, Nigerians assembled to protest against bad governance, meaning it's not just one person. It's almost everywhere, every institution, and a lot of mentions, a lot of our leaders were mentioned. And why do you think that is? It's because they have not really equipped themselves with the level of competence to handle their jurisdictions.
You think so?
I feel so, because if you go by the books, and why in the first place are they presenting those forged certificates or fake certificates?
It's just a screening process.
A screening process to show that you've gone through education. It's expected that when you go through education, you learn something out of it, right? And that's why I was saying that the educational sector teach you certain level of things. Maybe through your civic education, you're being taught this and that. If you're a doctor, for instance, you must have done your biology well, you must have done your chemistry well to know your X and Y. And then when you are presented with a situation that you have to apply this level of expertise, you do it excellently, right? So your certification shows that you've gone through the classrooms, you know your onion, and you're able to handle your responsibilities adequately.
Okay.
So whatever profession you're in, that's what certification does for you. So I don't need to basically check your results from your nursery school till your, as soon as you tell me you're a doctorate degree holder, a PhD degree holder, I expect a certain level of competence from you, right? And even when I'm relating with you, I don't go on to define terms with you, especially terms that have to do with your proficiency, what you are a PhD holder in. Right? Unfortunately, that's not the case. If you have conversations with a lot of people who are doctorate degree holders and will get the favor of the general public because they assume that they are authorities in their field, and that's what's fast-tracking their career progressions to even leadership positions, you'll be overwhelmed with what it is that they have upstairs, right? So subliminally, one thing that have taken us really far is actually really far in backwards, right, in the whole situation we are finding ourselves right now, is this issue of certificate forgery, right? The lack of competence the lack of, basically good leadership is all stemming from these systems that have been compromised. In order for us to curtail this, then we have to take really seriously the educational sector and create accountability measures that will help us monitor all of these processes.
Okay, so good education, quality education and certifications that can also be, you can always defend, whenever you're called upon, can also be attributed to, good leadership. It's a bit complicated, UD.
We're not visionary people. We've lost our vision, right? And we're not creating an all-inclusive, system. I still go back to the system. There's nothing you will say that will not take us back to the system, because outside the shores of the country, as much as education is prioritized, right? There is also vocation. There's and there's an engagement, in fact, a high engagement for vocation. But beyond the vocation too, there is a place of vision. When you say the American dream, it is something that whether you're educated, you're illiterate, you're whatever you are, you believe in that dream. Because there's certain people that have been taught to have reflected the hearts of a generation of people, whether in present, past, or in the future, have been able to map out something strategic, right? That should drive, the course of that organization or that community or that society. Are we taking the cooking?
All right, let's quickly squeeze in this call before we proceed. Father, hello, good afternoon to you.
Hello?
Yes, good afternoon to you.
Okay,
all right, please do us a call back.
All right, do well to call back though. But yeah, back to what I was saying. I agree with you. Now, my concern, Kamal, is that we have now been so focused on the Pali, because education is supposed to be is the light bringer. We've seen it as the light bringer and all that, or the light bearer, forgetting that look, there are other aspects too. That education is not only as a result of what do they call it now, certification or certificates, or even those certificates are proof. And that's why every Tom, Dick, and Harry can go to one Toronto,
right.
Do you understand? And then come back to us and tell us that I'm a graduate, not just a grad, I'm a doctorate degree, I'm a prof, I'm a PhD holder, and all of that. If you recall, just recently, I think the NCC or the NUC. Had disqualified some schools, even some degrees. JAM has recently too has said, what, there are some schools we will not allow you to go to. Recently WAEC has banned some schools.
All because of this lack of integrity.
So it does mean that there is something in education that the other side are fighting, because they know the power of education. But then again, we have allowed the wrong, the bad eggs to simmer in.
Absolutely.
How do we weed them out?
Absolutely. I would like to start by responding to you saying it's beyond just education, right? I would like to see vocation also as part of education,
exactly.
right?
Okay,
So even within our school systems, you're being taught various vocations,
sure,
and you're being put through these vocations by people who are advanced in the field of education, right? So that certification is to show that you've gone through this, and basically you are now strong enough to stand as an artisan or an authority in your field. Because you'd fear, we've had issues of collapse all around, buildings all around the country.
Sure.
Why do you think that's coming up? Right? Civil engineers go through all of this. It's basically vocation, but they are not experienced enough to know that this rod cannot carry this amount of this, you can't do this. So it's also a problem. And you're right to say that it's a systematic problem, because whether it's vocation as it is, or education as per being a doctor or even a leader in whatever field you're in, you would see a place where these ethics and values come to play. Yes, we are talking about integrity today, but I mean, if I am to outline the 7 ethics and values enshrined in Chapter 2, Section 23 of the 1999 Constitution as amended, then you'd see a place for discipline, religious tolerance, dignity of labor, self-reliance, social justice, integrity, as we're discussing, and I think dignity of labor, haven't I mentioned, but one other, right? So all of these things put together is what's going to help us progress.
Right.
However, when talking about integrity in the educational sector, it's not just about that, but it's actually very important that we look in there too, because as you can see, there is no profession, no member of the system, regardless of how you want to see the education, that doesn't go through education.
Yes.
Be it from school, be it from home, be it from society. Exactly. So you're going to get educated one way or the other.
Right.
It's from where we are as a developing country. It's just important to ensure that you'll be getting the right education from wherever it is you find yourself. So we have to do due diligence to ensure that we get this right, especially within the educational sectors.
All right. Well, time is not our friend. You might just have to permit us, Kamal, to have an extension maybe next week.
All right, that's
to
fair.
talk more about this as well, because I mean our time is actually fast spent. It's just 2 minutes away from the top of the hour, and we see that the listener on the other side of the radio is probably itching, you know, to share one or two as far as this topic is concerned. But before we let you go, Kamal, how best would you address this notion that education is a scam? Because we have a number of youth who are graduates and they are roaming the streets.
So actually, that's one thing we are trying so hard to address, because that particular saying education is a scam.
Do you believe it's a scam?
No, I don't.
Okay.
It's emanating from a place of pain, and you would understand their pain. That after you go through the system, you're expected to have a job waiting for you because you're qualified. I know it's so much pain, but I'm going to say 2 things to address this. The first is the fact that if we solve the lack of integrity within the educational sector, you see, from the inception where you're trying to get admission and struggling alongside someone who knows the admission officer, that won't come to play.
Okay.
You will get admission on seemingly because you're deserving of it, and then when you graduate and you have a very good class of degree, you will be prioritized, right? Not because you know the DG of the organization or the CEO of the organization, because what's in play is a proof that you've gone through an educational system.
At what point are we going to get to that level?
Because
it appears the journey is really very far.
So this is it for me, right? I like to say that there's no late in trying to start a new beginning. You could start at any time. So if we agree, if we educate ourselves and have leaders who basically align to the vision of the ethics and values, so you see that could be resolved in no time. Create accountability system, monitoring systems, and that's fine. We'll surely get there.
Okay, I'd like to say a very big thank you to Ozo Francis Namani, watching live from Amagunze in Enugu State. But this is one conversation, just like I said before, would have a continuation next week, same time, same station. Sultan Kamal Abdulaziz is the coordinator, Generation for Societal Change, right here in Abuja. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure, Hefe. Thank you, Nigerians. Thank you.
All right. And my colleague, Chief Obong Uduak Daniel.
Right. Thank you, Omoife. This is a spotlight. Right.
Well, all right. I am Omoife Peace Osemere. Keep listening and don't touch the dial.